Good morning and happy holiday. Happy Thanksgiving late. And I think I've seen a record. Imagine them had in the middle 30s at their house. Debbie had family. I think they're turning it up. Debbie Green had family that had 75 for one gathering. She was at another gathering, but I think that's the record from what I can tell. 75 for Thanksgiving. That would be really something. That's what you call a crowd, absolutely. But I hope it went well. I hope all those who visited with you made it home safely. And I enjoyed having leftovers 2 or 3 times. And it's some of the better leftovers we found out over the years. I want us to turn to Judges chapter 6 today. We're looking at encounters with God, and haven't totally gone to Hebrews 11 to work from that list. I plan to do that in the future, perhaps. But this is one of those stories that we study as children and rarely look at otherwise. And I thought it would be a good reminder to those of us who've not studied it recently, and a first-time study perhaps for others who don't spend much time in the Judges. In working through this book in times past, I found myself circling a statement that's made, and the first one is Judges 3, verse 11. Othniel, one of the judges, in verse 11 says, "So the land had peace for 40 years. And if you look in verse 29, the land had peace for 80 years. And if you turn the page to the end of the end of chapter 5, the land had peace for 40 years. And as much as any statement in the Judges that you can see, Israel went like this. There was periods when they were faithful to God, and there were periods when they were not faithful to God. And when they were faithful, it was a time of peace. When they were not, it was not a time of peace. And God allowed other nations to conquer them or to have dominion over them in some form. The word judges, in this book is not a court system. It's more of someone who's in charge, someone who's sent as a person from God, and many times to reign. But it's called the book of Judges. I've not ever heard a different explanation for that. Gideon, chapter 6. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and we saw the verse before, prior to 40 peaceful years, they did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. And because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountains and caves and strongholds. And whenever the Israelites planted their crops, in verse 3, they would invade that country and take the crops. So the Midianites would come and at the harvest time and take the produce that had been raised by the people. They came upon their livestock, verse 5, their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count the men and their camels. First time in Scripture we see camels used in war. It gave them a great advantage as far as speed to carry people as well as supplies. They invaded the land to ravage it, and Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. And that is a natural response when life is difficult, and it had happened for a period of time. It's not that they'd not cried out before, but they certainly are shown having cried out to the Lord because of this annual pillage that was brought upon them by the Midianites. Verse 7, the Israelites cried to the Lord because of Midian, and he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I snatched you from the power of Egypt and from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them from before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live, but you did not listen to me." And what we know is, and it's not the first place, not the first time, they would be told by God to go in and drive out the enemies and do not intermarry with them. Do not marry those in whose land you're going. Do not participate in their rituals. Be very distinct in those places. But certainly don't intermarry and don't be led into the worship of idols. And the worship of the idols dedicated to Baal were very much a part of this time. And so he's reminding them what you were told based on what I did, and you didn't listen. And, of course, that's given to us as a prelude to the next paragraph, which talks about sending Gideon. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak of Oprah that belonged to Joash, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. So they did what they could to preserve some of their produce, some of their harvest. And the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, and he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And that would give him and us an indication of how God intended to use him, to use Gideon against the Midianites. And when he appeals to him, he acknowledges the person that he is. "But, sir, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our fathers told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and put us in the hands of Midian." If we will be candid with ourselves, we many times say similar things when things happen in our life. Why did this happen? Maybe it's just a general statement about general things happening in our country. Why did this happen to me? And that's when we see it as personal with God. We see it as God did this to me, or he allowed this to happen to me. And that's the better understanding of sovereignty. There's nothing wrong with that lament. Remember, we talked about that. But as long as we love, praise, and trust, say what you need to say. Put your emotions into words. Deal with it as best you can so that you can go forward in faith. But in the lament circumstance that may repeat itself, these type questions are sometimes part of that. I thought you were going to always be with me. I thought you would never forsake me, because we feel alone. In many of the Psalms, David talks about that. Your silence. Why are you so silent? You've left me. And all of that's not true, but it's the way we feel. It's our emotions when things in this world happen, and we're trying to figure them out. I'm not sure who told me this. It's been a number of years. Someone told me a number of years ago that our life will be easier to reckon with if we just acknowledge that we will not have all the information that God has, and we won't have nearly the understanding we wish we had. We're not going to have the understandings of things that we wish we would have. And so there's higher teachings and roots of our faith that we can go back to. I call them, we have them on a hook over here. It's that faith hook. And we can just take it out and look at it and remember it and then put it back up there for another time. That faith hook will be there for us, and we have to think and look at them from time to time and deal with the emotions of what's happening in our world. But we have some faith hooks that are there for us. Another phraseology may be we have anchors, if you like that better. But we have anchors, we have hooks for our life. And we can count on them if we remember we don't have understanding of all that we wish we had. Why, when, who, how, all those questions that come up in life. So Gideon asked questions. The book began with the reminder of God telling his people that. It's not the first time. I am the God who brought you out of Egypt. I'm the God who gave you this promised land. I'm the God, I'm the God, I'm the God. And he mentions things that he's done on their behalf. The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" Now, what had he just asked? I think it's interesting. Has the Lord abandoned us and put us into the hands of Midian? The latter part of verse 13. Well, am I not sending you? Mighty warrior, he addressed him as. So as if to say, wait a minute, Gideon, what you're saying isn't honest, it's not fair, because you're a mighty warrior and I'm sending you to deal exactly with one of your questions. So I give both of them credit. But Lord, Gideon asked, how can I save Israel? Verse 15. We're in Judges 6 for some who've come in. My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. And it's one of the main messages of this lesson today and of this story in the Old Testament. And this is the root of it. Here's a mighty warrior, but I'm not from a large tribe, and I'm not even one of the strongest in my family. And why is that almost always the case in Scripture? Yes, yes, and that's going to be revealed very quickly when he starts reducing the number of people who would go to battle for him. If God says, give me 1 million people and we'll beat the Midianites who have 300,000, who gets the credit? Who gets the glory? The people. The leaders of the people and the people who did the work. God always reduces it on purpose to reveal His power, His working on behalf of His people. He could overwhelm them. And there's a point to where it's questioned, why aren't we larger? We'll see that here. But the Lord answered, verse 16, I will be with you, and you will strike down the Midianites as if they were but one man. And that's a metaphor of any circumstance or any groups of people who depend upon themselves. It's humanism defined, some suggest. Humanism is doing it myself, doing it by my own power, by my own strength, not dependent on anything, anyone. It's me, humanism. It's the human in me that will bring this about. You're going to be so powerful that whatever their numbers are, not stated yet, but Gideon would have known they had large numbers. When I'm with you, you will strike them down as if they were but one man. And any person can defeat one man if you're a mighty warrior, using his words. But of course, with God, all things are possible. Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring an offering and set it before you." The story of Gideon, looked at from an adult perspective, is troubling because God allows Gideon to put him at a test. And he does it again after this. He's allowed to put God to a test. Prove yourself. Show me something. And that's unusual in Scripture. We're not encouraged to put God to a test. We saw that with the Shunammite woman last week in this class. Don't put God to a test. That's not your place. But here, Gideon suggests something. I don't have an answer for it. I don't have an answer. I've never heard anyone give an answer of why he allowed that to take place. But let me go and prepare a sacrifice. Now, what's odd to you about verse 17? Verse 14, the Lord turned to him. Gives us a clue. In verse 17, don't give me a sign to show me that it is you, God, Jehovah, talking to me. Do not go away. Apparently, he's appeared to him in a human form. God is appearing to Gideon in a human form. The language suggests that. It's not a vision. It's as if it's in a personal human form. And the Lord said, I will wait until you return. Gideon went in, prepared a young goat from an ephah of flour he made bread without yeast. Putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot, he brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. Quickly, we're told of several hours, even maybe days, of a preparation of what he brought before God. What we're not told, but we know because the Midianites came annually during the harvest and took everything that Israel had raised for their own sustenance. These are things that would have been costly. It would not have been easy to find them. So Gideon is taking time and he's going to the trouble to offer a fairly expensive sacrifice, if you will. Goes against the circumstances of what's been occurring to the people. But after making that preparation, the angel of God said to him, so here God is identified as someone, as a messenger. Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock, pour out the broth. And Gideon did so. And with the tip of the staff that was in his hand, the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread. And the angel of the Lord disappeared. And when Gideon realized it was the angel of the Lord, he declared, O sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the next verse gives us information to tell us that the Lord said to him, peace, do not be afraid, you're not going to die. So you have God representing, it seems, himself in a human form, and then an angel of the Lord becomes involved in it, but he leaves and God is there again. So it seems like there's two things that have taken place to Gideon. Verse 24, so Gideon built an altar to the Lord and called it the Lord is Peace. To this day it stands in Ophrah among thee, and he mentions the name of the people. That same night the Lord said to him, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal, and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this bluff, using the wood of the Asherah pole that you have cut down. Offer the second bull as a burnt offering." Before calling him as a warrior to go do what he needed him to do, God is putting Gideon to a test. We're told there that his father, probably his family, worshipped the idols of Baal. And the idols of Baal tended to be put on high places. The Asherah poles are seen throughout the Old Testament. The Asherah poles are seen throughout the Old Testament, and it's part of the worshiping of Baal, the worshiping of idols. So I want you to take a bull, a specific one, and I want you to go up and I want you to tear down the idol to Baal, and I want you to tear down the Asherah pole, but use the Asherah pole as fire so as to offer the sacrifice that I've asked you to offer. So tear down the idols, use the wood from the Asherah poles, and use it for this sacrifice. So Gideon took 10 of his servants, did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family and the men of the town, he did it at night rather than in the daytime. Why was he afraid? He tore down the idols of Baal, which everyone worshipped. And he knew they would not be pleased with that. He tore down the Asherah poles. He did it at night, so no one would at least immediately recognize it. Obviously, they would see it in the daytime. He did what God told him to do, and God needed to test him to see if he was still beholding not to him as the sovereign Lord, he had just called him that, to whether or not he would acknowledge him over the idols of Baal. And that's important. How would you define an idol in the simplest of terms? What is an idol? Something you worship, and the word worship connotes, Terry, anything put in God's place. It can be money, it can be work, it can be pleasure, it can be education. So many things can become an idol, and don't think of something that you fashion and sit down and worship. Anything that's put between you and God becomes an idol. I know a young man that's faithful for many, many years, and he and his son got caught up with travel baseball, and that became their idol, became their God. And that became more important than things they had done in their family for years. Suddenly, travel leagues, travel athletics took the preeminence, and they haven't returned back to God yet in that specific way of worship on Sunday. It happens slowly, but it happens. Anything that takes the place of God. And worship certainly is a part of that. So, he did this at night. But in the morning, verse 28, when the men of the town got up, there was Baal's altar demolished, the Asherah pole beside it cut down, the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. Who did this? And when they carefully investigated, they were told Gideon did it. Now, the chapter leaves where I want us to go to give us their response. Bring out your son, he must die because of what he's done. And Joash replied, the father who worshipped Baal gives this reply. Are you going to plead Baal's case? Verse 31. Are you trying to save him? You're trying to save an idol? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by mourning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. And that day they called Gideon Jerub Baal, which means let Baal contend with him, because he broke down Baal's altar. Gideon got a new name that day. His father came to his defense and said what common sense would have someone say. You're defending an idol? Why can't the idol defend himself? Let the idol speak. Let the idol react. Let Baal deal with this. Of course, you can't. It's an inanimate object. Inability to do any of those things. Verse 33 gets to the heart of the chapter. Very quickly, we're told that the Midianites and the Amalekites and all eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. So it seems to tell us that maybe it was harvest time, and it seems to tell us they were gathering to do what they'd done before. And the Spirit of the Lord, verse 34, came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning his people, the Abiezrites, to follow him. And he sent the word out. And Gideon, verse 36, if you will save Israel by my hand. Again, I don't have any reasoning of why Gideon was allowed to test God. Rarely is that allowed in Scripture. But he asked for proof. Tell me, prove yourself. That's what the testing means. Let me come up with something so you have to do it to prove yourself to me. Just saying that ought to get our attention when we're suggesting, God, prove yourself to me. Jehovah God to a human. Not normal. And we ought not to do it. This isn't a practice that we should follow. Yes. Yeah. I understand the reasoning, and I think that's why the wording is as it should. But it's a circumstance that's odd. It's a circumstance that's odd. And if he was appearing in human form, stay here. He looked at him, if you will. Some of the language suggests that. Well, Gideon rose early the next day. He squeezed the fleece, wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. So it was wet. God proved himself by doing this extraordinary thing. Gideon said to God, don't be angry with me. Let me have just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece. At least he called it what it was. This time, make the fleece dry and the ground covered with dew. And that night God did so. Only the fleece was dry and all the ground was covered with dew. Pretty distinct. Pretty certain proofs. It's actually the fourth one in this long chapter. It's the fourth time that Gideon has, if you will, inquired of the Lord in this unusual way. Did I hear a comment? Somebody coughing maybe. Roddy? Oh, yeah. 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 It's happened, but it's not something that you see very often. Yeah. Absolutely.
And he is willing to show us and let us put him, or let these men, I don't know, let us put him to the test
Mm-hmm.
to prove to them that he is God and he is with them. One other comment, not much.
I don't want you to. Keep going.
Study the fight of the Israelites when they wanted a king, or they wanted to have a king, because they were beginning, they were wanting to depend on the king for their success, their power, their
Yeah.
prosperity. He also did not want them to have horses and chariots, because then they would begin to believe in themselves.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And I think that's a big part of the reason that God let Gideon put him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm where the power is at. Trust me.
Yeah. I don't think there's any question. Roddy's commented on several times when God allowed others to put God to a test. Moses, first of all. And certainly the reasoning is to be sure that the power was from God. And there's no question that that's the overriding message of this story. This is God's action. God did this with the fleece, the double use of the fleece and liquid, if you will. Well, we get to the heart of the matter. And from a man's perspective, from a human perspective, let me say it that way, we can understand why this needed to take place as far as the winnowing of the number of soldiers that would be used. Verse 2, chapter 7, you have too many men for me to deliver Midian into your hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her. We're not left to wonder why this takes place. We're not left to wonder. I appreciate that. Announce to the people, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. Now just imagine in your mind the sheer volume of people that we're talking about. We're given numbers. What we're told beneath or between the lines is that 22,000 were so trembling with fear, they probably wouldn't have been much use from a human perspective, but the fear element, and 10,000 remain. Verse 4, there are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them there for you. If I say, this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So Gideon took the men down to the water. And there the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with their tongues like a dog from those who kneel down to drink. 3,000 men lapped with their hands to their mouth. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. It was confusing to me when I first heard and saw this a number of years ago until I watched myself go to the bathroom to brush my teeth. I can't remember any time in my life that I've ever turned on the water and got down low and taking my mouth to the faucet to retrieve the water. If some of you do that, it's not right or wrong. I have always been one of those who took water into my hands and then took it to my mouth. For many years, I don't like to do that. I take a cup. I always have a cup in the bathroom, and I use it to put water in to rinse my mouth or whatever. What does a dog do? A dog just goes straight to the water and starts using his tongue, and the horse, others, to retrieve the water. And the fewer number, remember we're comparing 10,000 to now 300. 300 lapped with their hands to their mouths. I don't have any conclusion as to why. It was just a way to separate them. There's nothing that suggests one is not healthy. There's nothing to suggest anything about it. It's just a way of separating the larger amount, 10,000 remained, verse 3, to get it down to 300, verse 7, with the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the other men go, each to his own place. So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites to their tents, but kept the 300 who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. Do you have any observation on this and maybe something you've heard, Roddy? Oh, yeah. Head still up?
Right. That's the only part that I've ever heard about, but it has some merit.
Terry's back there shaking her head, so somebody's mentioned that to her too. Others? I appreciate the observations. Like I say, we don't study this very often. We have to figure it out. And I appreciate what you helped me to figure it out. And I'll be able to say those things at other times when this would come up. Yeah. A good question, and even with that said, which is true, it would have taken a while for 10,000 people to go down to a body of water to show how they were going to retrieve water. So that in itself took some time, but it certainly would have been more otherwise. Monty? Yeah.
They didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Except follow directions.
Yeah.
So how good of warriors they were, or how alert they were, that was really insignificant. But I mean, I'm like everybody else. I've often wondered, but I think it's just simply a matter of God figuring out a way to divide the people and choose who you want.
Yeah. Well, there's no question of that. And the overall lesson is, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her. Verse 2, this is a process that winnowed it down to a smaller number of people. God didn't need but 10. He didn't need but 1. But he winnows it down to 300, and they prepare to go into battle. Now the camp of Midian lay below them in the valley. Verse 9, during that night the Lord said to Gideon, get up, go down against the camp, because I'm going to give it into your hands. Now that's an expression and principle that was used when he sent the 12 spies into the promised land. Go in and spy out the land. This is the land that I'm going to give you. But you go in and see the land. When they went into the land, they saw the enemy and they felt as if they were grasshoppers. They got their eye off of the God who was giving it to them and looked at themselves. And because we know that happened as part of Israel history, I can't help but imagine a test, if you will, for these 300 men and Gideon to go through something very similar. If you're afraid to attack, verse 10, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what they're saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack the camp. So they had to go down close contact, outside tents, to hear people talking. That took a lot of faith. Let's not lay it aside. So he and Purah's servant went down into the outpost of the camp, and all the others, 2 nationalities of Gentiles, plus all the other Eastern peoples, and we're suddenly thinking, how many people? How big a group? Well, we're given that. They were settled in the valley thick as locusts. Their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. A numberless group of people. And they had to go down among them. And Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. In the camp, I drew the line from verse 10. They went down into the camp, and Gideon arrived in the camp to hear someone sharing a dream. I had a dream, he was saying. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. His friend responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." Those who've studied this with someone else leading the discussion, or those who've taught this, maybe to a children's group, how do you explain verse 14? I think there's an easy explanation, but how have you heard it explained? How did this Midianite man know about God and his power and the power that he could use in this single individual? How could that be? How could that have taken place? No explanation? No guesses? The answer is God. God revealed it to him. God revealed it to him. It's the truth. It's a dream that had truth attached to it. And don't forget, it's exactly what Gideon needed to hear in order to be able to go forward in faith to do what God needed him to do in faith. God's hand was at work. We don't have to understand everything. We don't have to have a complex answer to everything. God revealed this is the best answer I've ever surmised. And when Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshiped God. He returned to the camp. "Get up, the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands," dividing the 300 men into 3 companies. He placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them with torches inside. So jars with torches so they would have light. "Watch me, follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. And when I and all who are with me blow their trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." How would you say that in modern Alabama terms? Surround the camp and make a lot of noise. Cause a ruckus. Cause a ruckus. Why does it work? At least one person talking to another person had already seen in a dream what God might bring about. And of course he did. It's time to stop. Wow, time flies. And that's what God did. And at the end of the story, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp, verse 22, to turn on each other with their swords. I know what that's like a little bit when you're wakened from a deep sleep and you wake up and you kind of sit up and you have no idea for several seconds where you are. You slept so deep that you were confused when you woke up. And God caused that to occur. And he caused them to turn on themselves. And God won the victory. God won the victory. Thank you.